Hi, I'm Lieutenant Commander Adriana Kessler. 3 weeks ago, my sister Natalie handcuffed me in my own office at the Meridian Naval Intelligence Center. She thought she was arresting a traitor. What she didn't know was that Captain Harrison, her commanding officer, was about to walk in and salute me with the words, "Admiral, your orders." That moment shattered 15 years of family lies and exposed a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of naval command. What happens when the person who raised you tries to destroy your career only to discover you outrank everyone in the room? Stay with me. This story doesn't end how anyone expected. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The fluorescent lights in Conference Room Delta buzzed like angry wasps that morning. I should have taken that as a warning. Instead, I was focused on the classified briefings spread across the mahogany table. Satellite imagery from the Korsakov Peninsula, intercepted communications, and intelligence reports that had kept me awake for the past 72 hours. The coffee in my Navy-issued mug had gone cold hours ago, but I barely noticed. When you're tracking potential enemy submarine movements in the Arctic Circle, creature comforts become secondary. I'd been stationed at Meridian for 6 months, working under what the brass called deep operational security. To everyone around me, including my family, I was just another mid-level intelligence analyst. Lieutenant Commander Adriana Kessler, pushing papers and attending briefings. Nothing special. Nothing that would warrant attention from anyone outside the intelligence community. That was exactly how Admiral Thornfield wanted it. My sister Natalie had always been the family success story. 8 years older, she'd joined the Coast Guard straight out of college while I was still figuring out what I wanted to do with my life. By the time I'd finally enlisted in the Navy, she was already making a name for herself in maritime law enforcement. Captain Harrison spoke of her like she walked on water. Decorated officer, exemplary service record, the kind of person who made the Coast Guard recruitment posters look authentic. What Natalie didn't know was that my unremarkable career had taken a rather remarkable turn 2 years ago. The Navy had a problem. Too many high-ranking officials were becoming targets for foreign intelligence services. The solution was elegant in its simplicity. Hide your most valuable assets in plain sight. Give them cover identities, mundane assignments, and let them operate from the shadows while maintaining their actual rank and clearance. I wasn't just Lieutenant Commander Kessler analyzing satellite imagery. I was Rear Admiral Kessler, running a joint task force investigating suspected security breaches within the Coast Guard Sector 7. The irony wasn't lost on me that my own sister's unit was under investigation. The morning everything changed started like any other. I'd arrived at Meridian before dawn, using my security badge to access the restricted floors that housed our operations center. The elevator required 2 separate keycards and a biometric scan, standard procedure for anyone working with cosmic clearance materials. Most of a building's occupants never saw these levels, never knew they existed. To them, the elevator simply didn't stop on floors 12 through 15. I was deep in analyzing communication patterns between suspected Chinese intelligence assets and several Coast Guard personnel when my assistant, Yeoman Rodriguez, knocked on my office door. His face was pale, and his usually steady hands were trembling slightly as he held a classified message folder. "Ma'am," he said, his voice carefully controlled, "we have a situation developing in Conference Room Delta. Captain Harrison is requesting your immediate presence, but—" He paused, glancing around as if the walls might be listening. "There's something else. Your sister is here." My blood went cold. Natalie had no clearance for this facility, no reason to be anywhere near Meridian's classified operations center. The fact that she was here meant either someone had made a catastrophic security error or something much worse was happening. I closed the classified files, secured them in my office safe, and straightened my uniform. Whatever was waiting for me in Conference Room Delta, I had a feeling my carefully maintained cover was about to be blown apart. The question was whether I could salvage the operation and figure out who had betrayed us before everything I had worked for came crashing down. As I walked down the corridor towards what felt like a professional execution, I couldn't help but think about all the family dinners where Natalie had talked about her work, her cases, her unwavering belief in law and order. She'd always been so proud of her badge, so certain that she was one of the good ones fighting against corruption and criminality. What would she do when she discovered that the sister she thought she knew, the one she was about to arrest for treason, was actually the officer investigating corruption within her own ranks? The door to conference room Delta stood slightly ajar. Through the gap, I could see Natalie's familiar silhouette, her Coast Guard uniform pressed to perfection, her hand resting on the handcuffs attached to her duty belt. She was speaking in low, urgent tones to someone I couldn't see, but her body language screamed professional confidence. She thought she was about to make the arrest of her career. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and pushed open the door. Time to find out if 15 years of family loyalty could survive the next 15 minutes. Have you ever walked into a room knowing that nothing would ever be the same afterward? That feeling was about to become very, very real. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The Kessler family portrait hanging in our childhood home in Riverside Heights told a story of military excellence. 3 generations of service members, all standing at attention in their dress uniforms. Grandfather Wilhelm in his Army greens from Korea, Dad in his Navy whites from the Gulf War, Natalie in her Coast Guard blues, and me in my basic Navy uniform from Officer Candidate School. What the photo didn't show was the 15-year gap in our careers, or the secrets that would eventually tear us apart. Growing up, Natalie was everything I wanted to be. While I struggled through high school, changing majors twice in college, and generally disappointing our parents with my lack of direction, she was already making waves in the Coast Guard. Her promotion ceremonies were family events. Dad would dust off his old uniform, Mom would bake her famous apple pie, and we'd all gather at Coast Guard Station Bellport to watch Natalie pin on new insignia. I remember her promotion to Lieutenant Commander like it was yesterday. The ceremony was held on the dock with the sunset painting everything golden. Captain Harrison himself presided over the event, speaking about Natalie's unwavering dedication to maritime security and her natural leadership abilities. She stood there, spine straight, accepting congratulations from what seemed like half the Coast Guard's regional command. That night at dinner, she pulled me aside. "Adriana," she said, using the serious tone she'd perfected over years of military service, "you need to find your path. The Navy could be good for you, but only if you commit, really commit." She was right, of course. At 25, I was still drifting. My college degree in international relations hadn't led anywhere meaningful, and my series of civilian jobs felt more like marking time than building a career. When I finally enlisted, it felt less like a calling and more like surrender to family expectations. What Natalie didn't know was that the Navy had seen something in my background that interested them. My thesis on Cold War intelligence operations, my fluency in Russian and Mandarin, my psychological profile that they called exceptional compartmentalization abilities, all of it had caught the attention of naval intelligence recruiting. But the family only saw Lieutenant Junior Grade Adriana Kessler, assigned to what appeared to be routine intelligence analysis at various unremarkable postings. Norfolk Naval Base, then Pearl Harbor, then the Pentagon for what everyone assumed was a desk job pushing paper for senior officers. Each assignment looked progressively more boring on paper, which was exactly the point. The Sunday dinners at Mom and Dad's house in Riverside Heights became exercises in creative omission. Natalie would regale us with stories from her patrols, drug interdictions in the Caribbean, search and rescue operations off the Outer Banks, joint operations with the DEA that she couldn't detail but clearly took pride in. Meanwhile, I'd deflect questions about my work with vague mentions of intelligence briefings and data analysis. "Must be nice having a secure desk job," Natalie would say, not unkindly, but with the subtle superiority of someone who saw real action. No midnight emergency calls, no dangerous operations, just 9 to 5 and home for dinner. If only she knew about the months I'd spent in the Baltic Sea aboard a submarine, monitoring Russian naval communications, or the weeks in the South China Sea coordinating intelligence-gathering operations while officially being on administrative assignment in Hawaii. The cover stories were so good that even my own family believed them. Captain Harrison became a regular presence at these Sunday family gatherings once he and Natalie started working closely together. He was everything you'd expect from a Coast Guard captain, square-jawed, confident, with a kind of leadership presence that filled a room. He'd served with Dad briefly in the 80s, which gave him instant credibility with our parents. "Your daughters are both fine officers," he'd tell Dad over beers on the back porch. "Natalie is one of the best investigators I've ever worked with. Real instincts for sniffing out trouble." Then he'd glance at me with what I now recognize was carefully calculated dismissal. "And Adriana has certainly found her niche in the intelligence world. Important work, even if it's not as exciting as operational duty." The conversations would shift to Natalie's cases, her commendations, her growing reputation within Coast Guard law enforcement. I'd smile and nod, playing the role of the supportive younger sister whose career was respectable but unremarkable. It was easier than explaining that I couldn't discuss my actual work, even with family. The irony was that during those same Sunday dinners, Captain Harrison was often asking subtle questions about Navy intelligence procedures, about how information flowed between services, about security protocols at joint operations centers. Questions that seemed like casual professional interest from someone working on interagency cooperation. Questions I answered carefully, sharing only what was publicly available or commonly known. Natalie would jump in with her own observations about Navy personnel she'd worked with, about security procedures at naval facilities, about what she saw as weaknesses in inter-service communication. She was proud of her analytical skills, proud of her ability to spot patterns and inconsistencies that others missed. What none of us realized was that Captain Harrison was collecting our casual dinner conversation like intelligence assets, building a picture of Navy operations that would eventually be passed to people who shouldn't have had access to it. Our family's tradition of Sunday dinners had become an unwitting source of classified information. The last normal dinner we had was 3 months ago, just before I received my assignment to Meridian. Natalie had just been selected for a special task force investigating maritime smuggling operations, and she was buzzing with excitement about working directly under Captain Harrison's command. "It's a joint operation," she explained, cutting into Mom's pot roast. "Coast Guard, Navy, even some FBI involvement. Harrison says it's the kind of case that could make careers." Captain Harrison nodded approvingly. "Natalie's exactly the kind of officer we need for complex investigations. Someone who can see the big picture while managing the details." I congratulated her sincerely, genuinely proud of her achievement. What I didn't mention was that her career-making case was actually Operation Seahawk, the very investigation I'd been secretly assigned to monitor from the Navy side. While she thought she was investigating maritime smuggling, I was investigating whether information about naval operations was being leaked through Coast Guard channels. The perfect irony was that we were both hunting the same conspiracy from opposite sides, neither knowing the other was involved. As I sat there watching my sister and her commanding officer discuss their upcoming operation, I felt the familiar weight of compartmentalized knowledge. They had no idea that Lieutenant Commander Adriana Kessler was really Rear Admiral Kessler, operating under deep cover. They had no idea that their career-making case was actually part of a larger counterintelligence operation. Most importantly, they had no idea that the person they trusted, the man who'd become like family to us over the years, was the one we were both ultimately hunting. But that night, over dessert and coffee, everything still seemed perfect. The family portrait on the wall still told its story of military pride and service. The future still looked bright for both Kessler sisters. It would be the last time we'd all sit around that table together, the last time our carefully constructed facades would hold. In 3 weeks, those same family bonds that had sustained us through years of service would become the weapons used to destroy us. The perfect family dinner, perfectly innocent conversation, perfectly normal evening. Sometimes perfection is just the calm before the storm. The encrypted call came at 03:47 hours on a Tuesday morning that would forever divide my life into before and after. I was already awake, sitting in my secure apartment at Meridian Heights, nursing my 3rd cup of coffee while reviewing intercepted communications from the previous day. Sleep had become elusive since we'd detected the first anomalies in Operation Seahawk's communication patterns 3 weeks earlier. The caller ID showed only a series of numbers I recognized as Admiral Thornfield's emergency contact protocol. When his voice came through the encrypted line, it carried the kind of gravity that makes your stomach drop before your brain fully processes the words. Kessler, we have a problem. A big one. How quickly can you get to Secure Conference Room Alpha? 20 minutes, sir, I replied, already reaching for my uniform jacket. Make it 15. And Adriana? The use of my first name sent ice through my veins. Admiral Thornfield never used first names unless the situation was dire. Come armed and trust no one until we've talked. The line went dead, leaving me staring at the encrypted phone in my hand. In 18 months of working under deep cover, Admiral Thornfield had never told me to come armed to a meeting. Whatever had happened in the last few hours was serious enough to breach every protocol we'd established. I dressed quickly, checking my service weapon twice before holstering it. The pre-dawn streets of Meridian were empty, except for early shift workers heading to the naval facility. As I drove through the security checkpoints, I noticed more guards than usual, and their alert posture suggested they'd been briefed about a potential threat. Secure Conference Room Alpha was located 2 floors below the official basement level of Meridian Naval Intelligence Center, accessed through an elevator that required simultaneous key insertion by 2 authorized personnel. Yeoman Rodriguez was waiting for me at the checkpoint, his usually calm demeanor replaced by barely controlled tension. "Ma'am," he said quietly as we descended, "whatever happened last night, it's big. Admiral Thornfield has been here since 0000 hours, and there are FBI agents in the building." FBI agents. That meant whatever we were dealing with had crossed from military intelligence into federal criminal territory. My mind raced through the possibilities, none of them good. Admiral Thornfield was standing at the head of a conference table covered with classified documents, satellite photos, and what appeared to be surveillance footage displayed on multiple screens. His gray hair was disheveled, and his uniform looked like he'd slept in it. When he looked up at me, his expression was grim. "Sit down, Admiral," he said, using my actual rank for the first time in months. "What I'm about to tell you is going to change everything."
He activated a secure display showing communication intercepts from the previous night. The timestamps showed activity beginning at 22:37 hours, continuing through 01:45 hours. As I read the decoded messages, my blood turned to ice water. Someone had transmitted the complete operational structure of Operation Seahawk to an encrypted server in Eastern Europe. Not just basic information, detailed personnel files, security protocols, safe house locations, and most damaging of all, my true identity and operational status. "How?" I managed to ask, though my voice sounded strange to my own ears. Admiral Thornfield pulled up another screen showing metadata analysis. The transmission originated from a secure terminal at Coast Guard Sector 7, specifically from Captain Harrison's personal computer, using his security credentials. The room seemed to tilt. Captain Harrison, who'd been like family for years, who'd sat at our dinner table discussing baseball and sharing stories about his service record. Captain Harrison, who'd been carefully positioning himself to access Navy intelligence through his relationship with our family. "There's more," Admiral Thornfield continued. "The FBI has been monitoring suspicious financial transactions connected to Harrison for the past 6 months. Large deposits from shell companies with ties to foreign intelligence services. We think he's been selling information for at least 2 years. I stared at the evidence spread across the table. Bank records showing deposits totaling nearly $300,000, encrypted communications using protocols associated with known foreign operatives, travel records showing trips to locations that coincided with known intelligence exchanges. But why expose Operation Seahawk now? If he's been successfully gathering intelligence for 2 years, why burn his asset? Admiral Thornfield's expression grew even more serious. Because we were getting close. Too close. Our investigation was starting to focus on Coast Guard personnel with access to joint operations. Harrison realized that maintaining his cover was becoming impossible, so he's preparing to run. He pulled up a final screen showing airline reservations and financial transfers. Harrison booked flights to non-extradition countries for himself and 2 associates. The flights leave tonight. The implications hit me like a physical blow. If Harrison was running, he'd want to eliminate any evidence of his activities. That included silencing anyone who might have gathered information about his operations. Anyone like the Navy intelligence officer who'd been investigating his network. Anyone like me. "Sir," I said slowly, "my sister is part of Harrison's task force. If he's compromised, if he knows we're onto him..." "That's the other problem," Admiral Thornfield said grimly. "Intelligence suggests Harrison has fed your sister false information about a supposed Navy intelligence leak. He's convinced her that someone in naval intelligence is the actual security threat." The room spun as the full scope of the trap became clear. Harrison hadn't just been selling secrets. He'd been manipulating my sister, feeding her carefully crafted intelligence designed to make her believe I was the traitor. While I'd been investigating his network, he'd been positioning her to eliminate me. "What kind of false information?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Admiral Thornfield handed me a file marked with Natalie's name. Inside were fabricated documents suggesting that Lieutenant Commander Adriana Kessler had been passing classified information to foreign contacts. The evidence was sophisticated, convincing, and completely false, but Natalie would have no way of knowing that. "He's activated her," I whispered. "He's turned my own sister into an asset against me." "The FBI believes Harrison plans to use your sister to eliminate you, then disappear before anyone realizes what happened. He's convinced her she's conducting a legitimate counterintelligence operation." I thought about all those Sunday dinners, all the casual conversations about Navy procedures, all the times Harrison had asked seemingly innocent questions. He'd been building a profile of my family dynamics, learning how to manipulate our relationships, how to turn our loyalty against each other. "There's something else you need to know," Admiral Thornfield said quietly. Coast Guard intelligence received an anonymous tip yesterday claiming that a Navy intelligence officer at Meridian was planning to defect with classified information. The tip specifically named you. "Anonymous tip," I repeated flatly. "From Harrison, obviously. He set up everything so that when your sister arrests you, it will look like legitimate counterintelligence work. By the time anyone realizes the truth, he'll be long gone, and you'll be dead." The word hung in the air between us. Dead. This wasn't about career destruction or imprisonment. Harrison's plan required my permanent elimination. "Sir, what are my orders?" Admiral Thornfield was quiet for a long moment, studying the evidence spread across the table. "Officially, you're to maintain your cover and continue the investigation. Unofficially," he looked up at me with something that might have been sympathy, "your sister is already in the building. She arrived an hour ago with federal arrest warrants and a Coast Guard tactical team." My blood pressure spiked. "She's here? Now?" "Conference room Delta. She's waiting for Captain Harrison to arrive before proceeding with the arrest. She believes she's conducting a legitimate operation to apprehend a Navy traitor." I stood up abruptly, my mind racing through options. None of them were good. If I tried to explain the truth to Natalie, she'd think I was trying to escape justice. If I submitted to arrest, Harrison would ensure I never made it to trial. If I ran, it would confirm her suspicions about my guilt. "How long do I have?" "Harrison's helicopter landed 5 minutes ago. He's probably in the elevator, right now."
I looked at the evidence one more time, memorizing details, trying to prepare for a confrontation I'd never imagined possible. In 15 minutes, my sister would try to arrest me for treason. Her commanding officer would be there to ensure the operation succeeded. Neither of them would know they were participating in an elaborate murder disguised as law enforcement. The perfect trap, orchestrated by someone who'd spent years learning how to manipulate our family bonds, someone who turned our greatest strength, our loyalty to each other, into the weapon that would destroy us. As I headed toward Conference Room Delta, one thought kept echoing in my mind. Harrison had made one critical mistake in his planning. He'd assumed that Lieutenant Commander Adriana Kessler would be helpless against a Coast Guard arrest team. He had no idea he was about to face Rear Admiral Kessler, and that I'd spent the last 18 months preparing for exactly this kind of betrayal. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped into the corridor leading to what might be the last conversation I'd ever have with my sister. Walking down the corridor toward Conference Room Delta felt like moving through underwater. Every step seemed to take forever, yet I reached the door too quickly. Through the small window, I could see Natalie's profile as she reviewed documents spread across the conference table. She wore her dress blue uniform, the one reserved for official ceremonies and formal proceedings. Her service ribbons caught the fluorescent light as she moved, each one representing years of dedication I'd always admired. Standing beside her was Petty Officer Martinez from Coast Guard Intelligence, someone I recognized from joint briefings but had never worked with directly. He was adjusting what looked like recording equipment. They were planning to document everything. This wasn't just an arrest. It was going to be a formal interrogation designed to extract a confession. I took a breath and knocked twice, the standard military courtesy that felt absurd under the circumstances. Natalie looked up, saw me through the window, and her expression shifted into something I'd never seen before. Professional coldness mixed with what might have been disappointment or disgust. "Come in, Lieutenant Commander," she said, using my cover rank with emphasis that made it sound like an accusation. I entered the room slowly, keeping my hands visible and my movements non-threatening. The table between us was covered with photographs, documents, and what appeared to be surveillance footage printed on standard briefing paper. From my position, I could see portions of fabricated evidence Harrison had constructed, financial records showing payments I'd never received, meeting photographs that had been expertly doctored, communication logs that painted a picture of systematic betrayal. "Please sit down," Natalie continued, gesturing to the chair across from her. "We have some questions about your activities over the past 18 months. I remained standing. "Before we begin, I need to verify something. Who authorized this operation?" Natalie's eyebrows raised slightly. "I'm not required to discuss operational details with you. You're here to answer questions, not ask them." "Actually," I said carefully, "according to military justice procedures, I am entitled to know the authority under which I'm being detained and questioned." Petty Officer Martinez shifted uncomfortably. Natalie shot him a look that clearly meant stay quiet before turning back to me. "This operation was authorized by Captain Harrison under emergency counterintelligence protocols. We have credible evidence that classified information has been compromised and that you are the source of that compromise." I nodded slowly, processing not just her words, but her body language. Natalie was completely convinced of my guilt. Harrison had done his work well, providing her with evidence convincing enough to overcome years of sisterly trust. But there was something else in her posture. Hurt. This wasn't just professional for her. She felt personally betrayed. "May I see the evidence?" I asked. She hesitated, then slid a folder across the table. "These are copies. The originals are secured as evidence." I opened the folder and began examining Harrison's fabricated case against me. The attention to detail was impressive and terrifying. Bank records showing deposits from overseas accounts that I'd never opened. Communication logs showing encrypted messages sent from IP addresses traced to my apartment. Photographs of me at locations I'd never visited, meeting with people I'd never seen. But Harrison had made mistakes. Small ones that only someone with my clearance level and knowledge of counterintelligence procedures would notice. "These financial records," I said, pointing to a bank statement, "the routing number belongs to Cayman International Bank, but this account number format wasn't used by that institution until 2023. These transactions are allegedly from 2022. Natalie frowned. "What's your point?" "The point is that whoever created these documents made an error that proves they're fabricated." I flipped to another page. This communication log shows me sending encrypted messages at 13:47 hours on March 15th.
but I was in surgery that day having my appendix removed. There are medical records and witnesses. I watched Natalie's confidence waver slightly. She looked at Petty Officer Martinez, who shrugged. Neither of them had the technical background to verify the inconsistencies I was pointing out. These could be clerical errors, Natalie said, but her voice lacked conviction. Multiple clerical errors in different types of evidence, all conveniently supporting the same narrative? I closed the folder and slid it back across the table. Natalie, someone is playing.
Her face hardened. Don't try to manipulate me using our relationship. I've seen this before. Suspects trying to exploit personal connections to avoid accountability. I'm not trying to manipulate you. I'm trying to save your life. The words hung in the air between us. Natalie's hand moved instinctively toward her service weapon, and I realized how my statement must have sounded, like a threat. Explain that comment, Lieutenant Commander. I had reached the moment of decision. I could continue playing my cover role, submit to arrest, and hope that Admiral Thornfield's people could extract me before Harrison arranged my death. Or I could reveal the truth and hope that Natalie would listen long enough to understand the real situation. The person who gave you this evidence, I said slowly, is the actual security threat. You're being used as an unwitting asset in a counterintelligence operation designed to eliminate the real investigation. Natalie laughed, but there was no humor in it. Let me understand this correctly. You're claiming that Captain Harrison, a decorated officer with 22 years of service, is actually a foreign agent, and that I, a Coast Guard intelligence specialist, am too stupid to recognize fabricated evidence? I'm saying that Harrison has been compromised, and that he's manipulated you using your trust in him and your professional dedication. The evidence against me is sophisticated enough to fool anyone who doesn't have access to the specific databases needed to verify it. Prove it, she said flatly. I pulled out my secure phone and placed it on the table. Call Admiral Thornfield at Naval Intelligence Command. Authorization code Delta 77 Alpha. Ask him about Operation Seahawk. Natalie stared at the phone. How do you know that authorization code? Because I work for Admiral Thornfield. I have been for the past 18 months. Working for him, doing what? Investigating security breaches in joint Coast Guard Navy operations. Specifically, investigating whether classified information was being leaked through Coast Guard Sector 7. The color drained from Natalie's face. You've been investigating my unit? I've been investigating everyone with access to joint operational intelligence, including Captain Harrison. Petty Officer Martinez cleared his throat nervously. Ma'am, should I contact Captain Harrison? He should be here by now. No, Natalie said quickly, then looked at me with new uncertainty. If what you're saying is true, if you really work for naval intelligence, then you have clearance levels I don't. You'd have access to information that could verify or disprove these charges. I nodded. That's exactly right. And if you call Admiral Thornfield, he can verify my identity and my actual assignment. Natalie picked up the phone, then hesitated. What if this is part of an elaborate deception? What if you're trying to trick me into compromising the investigation? Then you'll have followed proper procedure by verifying my claims with higher authority. If I'm lying, Admiral Thornfield will confirm it, and you can proceed with the arrest. She stared at the phone for a long moment, then began dialing. The call connected after 2 rings. Admiral Thornfield? Sir, this is Lieutenant Commander Natalie Kessler, Coast Guard Intelligence. Authorization code Delta 77 Alpha. I need verification of the identity and assignment status of Lieutenant Commander Adriana Kessler. There was a pause. Is she with you now? Yes, sir. Put her on. Natalie handed me the phone. Admiral, this is Kessler. Report your status, Admiral. The word Admiral hit the room like a physical blow. Natalie's eyes widened, and Petty Officer Martinez actually stepped backward. Sir, I'm currently in Conference Room Delta at Meridian Naval Intelligence Center. I'm being questioned by Coast Guard personnel regarding fabricated evidence of security breaches. I believe Captain Harrison is preparing to execute the final phase of his extraction plan. Understood. Full authorization is granted for operational disclosure. Protect yourself and the Coast Guard personnel with you. Harrison is armed and extremely dangerous. The line went dead. I handed the phone back to Natalie, who was staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. Admiral? Rear Admiral Adriana Kessler, Naval Intelligence Command. I've been operating under deep cover for 18 months, investigating a security breach that we now know originates with Captain Harrison. Natalie sank into her chair, the implications crashing over her. All this time you've been, your superior officer, investigating your commanding officer for treason. The door to the conference room opened, and Captain Harrison walked in, his usual confident smile in place. He took in the scene, Natalie's shocked expression, the scattered evidence, my standing posture, and his smile widened. Captain Lieutenant Commander Kessler, he said, addressing Natalie, while pointedly ignoring me, I trust the interrogation is proceeding according to protocol? Natalie looked between Harrison and me, her face a mask of confusion and growing suspicion. Sir, there have been some complications. Complications? Harrison's eyebrows raised in what appeared to be genuine concern. What kind of complications? I remained silent, studying Harrison who micro-expressions, looking for tells that would confirm what Admiral Thornfield had revealed. The slight tension around his eyes when he looked at the evidence folder, the way his hand unconsciously moved toward his service weapon when he noticed Natalie's uncertain posture, the almost imperceptible glance toward the exit, calculating escape routes.
The suspect has made claims about her security clearance and operational status, Natalie said carefully. Claims that, if verified, would change the nature of this investigation. Harrison's smile never wavered, but I caught the momentary pause before he responded. Lieutenant Commander, you're allowing the suspect to manipulate you. This is a classic counterintelligence technique, creating doubt about the legitimacy of the investigation to buy time for extraction or evidence destruction. She provided Admiral Thornfield's direct authorization code. She knew operational details that weren't in the briefing materials. Authorization codes can be stolen, Harrison replied smoothly. Operational details can be obtained through the same intelligence networks that compromised our security in the first place. I decided it was time to act. Reaching into my jacket pocket slowly, keeping my movements visible to avoid triggering a defensive response, I withdrew a sealed envelope bearing Naval Intelligence Command letterhead. Captain Harrison, I said, speaking directly to him for the first time since he'd entered the room, before we proceed further, I need to present you with these documents. Harrison's eyes fixed on the envelope with laser intensity. What documents? Evidence collected during Operation Seahawk, financial records, communication intercepts, and travel documentation related to unauthorized intelligence transfers. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Harrison's facade cracked just enough for me to see the calculation behind his eyes. He was trying to determine how much I actually knew versus how much I was bluffing. I'm not familiar with any Operation Seahawk, he said, but his voice lacked the confident authority it had carried moments earlier. I opened the envelope and spread the contents across the table, overlaying Harrison's fabricated evidence against me with the real evidence Admiral Thornfield had compiled against him. Bank records showing systematic payments from shell companies, communication logs proving contact with known foreign intelligence operatives, travel receipts that coincided exactly with intelligence compromises in joint operations.
These financial records show deposits totaling $287,000 over the past 2 years, I said, pointing to highlighted entries. The deposits correlate directly with intelligence compromises in operations where you had access to classified materials. Harrison stepped closer to the table, his eyes scanning the documents. These could be fabricated just as easily as any other evidence. Anyone with access to intelligence databases could create convincing false documentation. You're absolutely right, I agreed. That's why I brought corroborating evidence. I activated my secure tablet and pulled up surveillance footage from 3 different locations. The first showed Harrison entering a private bank in the Cayman Islands 6 months ago. The second captured him meeting with a known intelligence broker in a Prague hotel lobby. The third was the most damning. Harrison accepting a briefcase from a man FBI surveillance had identified as a Chinese intelligence operative. Natalie stared at the footage, her face pale. "Sir, is that you in these videos?" Harrison's composure finally cracked. The charming smile disappeared, replaced with cold calculation. "Lieutenant Commander, you're being manipulated by sophisticated disinformation. This is exactly what foreign intelligence services do. They create false evidence to turn allies against each other. The metadata from these surveillance recordings has been verified by FBI digital forensics. The facial recognition analysis shows a 99.7% probability match. The voice pattern analysis of your conversation with the Chinese operative shows identical vocal signatures to your recorded briefings." Harrison's hand moved closer to his weapon. The movement was subtle, but in a room full of trained military personnel, it didn't go unnoticed. Petty Officer Martinez shifted position to give himself a clear line of sight, while Natalie's posture straightened into defensive readiness. "Captain," Natalie said slowly, "I need you to explain these allegations." "The allegations are fabricated," Harrison replied, but his tone had shifted from confident authority to defensive anger. "This is obviously a coordinated effort to discredit me by someone who has been caught selling secrets to foreign governments." I pulled out my phone and activated the speaker function. "Actually, Captain, let me share something that might clarify the situation." The audio that filled the room was crystal clear, obviously recorded through sophisticated surveillance equipment. Harrison's voice was unmistakable as he discussed operational details with someone speaking accented English. "The Navy intelligence officer investigating our network is getting too close. The sister is perfect. She trusts me completely, and she has the authority to make the arrest look legitimate." A second voice responded, "And after the arrest?" "Accidents happen during prisoner transport, especially when the prisoner is accused of treason and tries to escape." The blood drained from Natalie's face as she realized she was listening to a plan for my murder, orchestrated by the man she'd trusted implicitly. Harrison's hand was now resting on his weapon grip. The recording is obviously fabricated. Voice synthesis technology can replicate anyone's speech patterns. "The recording was made yesterday, FBI surveillance of your meeting with your handler in downtown New Meridian. The same handler who has been paying you to compromise operations for the past 2 years. I pulled up one final piece of evidence, a real-time tracking display showing Harrison's movements over the past 48 hours. This GPS data from your government-issued vehicle shows you visiting 3 locations that are not on any official Coast Guard business roster. Each location corresponds to a dead drop site identified by FBI counterintelligence." Harrison was trapped, and he knew it. The carefully constructed facade that had fooled my family for years had completely collapsed under the weight of irrefutable evidence. His hand tightened on his weapon as he calculated his remaining options.
"You know what's interesting about all this evidence?" I continued, keeping my voice calm despite the growing tension. "It shows that you've been planning this frame-up for months. You identified me as the Navy intelligence officer investigating the security breaches, and you spent weeks positioning my sister to become your unwitting asset." Natalie's voice was barely above a whisper. "You used me." "I used your dedication to duty," Harrison corrected, his mask finally dropping completely. "Your predictable loyalty to family and service. Your inability to see the bigger picture." "What bigger picture?" she demanded. Harrison's laugh was bitter. "The picture where military intelligence operates like a private club, where information is hoarded instead of shared, where dedicated officers like you are kept in the dark about operations that affect your own security." "So you decided to sell that information to foreign governments?" I asked. I decided to level the playing field to make sure that information reaches people who can actually use it effectively, instead of letting it sit in classified databases while real threats go unaddressed. It was the classic rationalization of a traitor, wrapping personal greed in ideological justification. Harrison had convinced himself that his betrayal was actually patriotism, that selling secrets was somehow serving a greater good. "Captain," Natalie said, her voice steady despite the shock, "I'm placing you under arrest for violation of the Espionage Act and conspiracy to commit murder." Harrison's weapon cleared its holster with practice speed, but he made a critical error in target selection. Instead of aiming at me, the person who could testify about his crimes, he pointed the gun at Natalie. "Nobody's arresting anybody. We're all going to walk out of here calmly, and then we're going to forget this conversation ever happened." The room was dead silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Harrison had just revealed his desperation by threatening to kill a Coast Guard officer to cover his crimes. Any possibility of negotiation or peaceful resolution had evaporated. "Captain," I said quietly, "you're outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded by federal agents. Your only chance of survival is to surrender now." "My only chance of survival is eliminating the witnesses, starting with the sister who knows too much." That's when I realized Harrison had made his final, fatal mistake. He'd forgotten that he wasn't just threatening Lieutenant Commander Natalie Kessler. He was threatening the sister of Rear Admiral Adriana Kessler. And I had not spent 18 months in deep cover to watch my family get murdered by a traitor. The moment Harrison's weapon pointed at Natalie, everything changed. The careful diplomatic dance we'd been performing for the past 20 minutes evaporated, replaced by the stark reality of lethal force in an enclosed space. Training kicked in automatically: assess threats, calculate angles, identify cover positions, determine optimal response protocols. Harrison had positioned himself near the conference room's main exit, giving him what he thought was tactical advantage. What he hadn't considered was that Meridian Naval Intelligence Center's conference rooms were designed with security incidents in mind. The seemingly innocent wall panels concealed ballistic protection, and the conference table itself was rated to stop small arms fire. "Captain Harrison," I said, keeping my voice level and non-threatening, "you're making this situation worse for yourself. Lower your weapon and we can discuss alternatives." "The only alternative is everyone staying quiet about what happened here," Harrison replied, his gun trained steadily on Natalie. "You walk away, I walk away, and we all pretend this conversation ever happened." Petty Officer Martinez had moved subtly toward the emergency communication panel built into the wall. One touch would alert base security and seal the building, but it would also likely provoke Harrison into immediate violence. I caught Martinez's eye and gave an almost imperceptible shake of my head. "Not yet." "You know that's not possible," Natalie said, her voice remarkably steady despite the weapon pointed at her chest. "Too many people know about this investigation. Admiral Thornfield, FBI counterintelligence, your own handlers. You can't eliminate all the witnesses." Harrison's laugh was harsh. "I don't need to eliminate all the witnesses. I just need to eliminate the key ones and buy enough time to reach my extraction point." "Your extraction point?" I repeated. "You mean the private jet scheduled to depart from Pemberton Airfield in 6 hours? Harrison's eyes widened slightly. He hadn't expected us to know about his escape plan in such detail. "FBI surveillance has been monitoring your movements for weeks. Your handler, the one you met with yesterday, he's been in federal custody since this morning. The shell companies funding your accounts have been frozen. Your extraction team has been arrested." The color drained from Harrison's face as he realized the scope of the operation that had been building around him. "You're lying." I pulled out my secure phone, keeping my movements slow and visible. "I can call Agent Rivera at FBI Counterintelligence right now. She can confirm that Operation Seahawk entered its final phase at 0800 this morning." "Don't move," Harrison snapped, swinging the weapon toward me before returning it to Natalie. "Don't touch that phone." The rapid target switching revealed Harrison's deteriorating mental state.
Trained military personnel don't make erratic movements with firearms unless they're losing control of the situation. His carefully planned operation was collapsing, and he was beginning to panic. "Captain," Natalie said quietly, "you trained me. You taught me about tactical assessment and strategic thinking. You know as well as I do that threatening federal officers only adds charges to your case. Surrender now, and you might be able to negotiate."
Negotiate? Harrison's voice rose. Negotiate with what? Life in prison versus execution? 20 years in solitary versus 30? Negotiate for information, I said. Intelligence services always value cooperation from former assets. Names, methods, operational details. The FBI would much rather have a cooperative witness than a martyred traitor. Harrison considered this, his weapon wavering slightly. For a moment, I thought rational calculation might overcome desperation. Then his expression hardened. No. Too many people have been compromised. Too many operations burned. They'll want someone to blame, and I'm not spending the rest of my life in a federal prison because you couldn't leave well enough alone. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Harrison was moving past rational thought into pure survival mode, which made him exponentially more dangerous. I needed to change the dynamic before he decided that killing all the witnesses was his only option. "There's something you should know before you make any irreversible decisions," I said, about why I was really assigned to investigate Coast Guard operations. "I already know why. Because Navy intelligence suspected information leaks and wanted to identify the source. That's what we wanted you to think. The truth is, we've known about your activities for over a year. Operation Seahawk wasn't designed to catch you. It was designed to map your entire network." Harrison's face went white. "What are you talking about?" I reached into my jacket pocket, moving slowly and deliberately. "Admiral Thornfield authorized me to show you this if the situation became critical." I withdrew a thick file folder marked with classification stamps and placed it on the conference table where Harrison could see it. "This contains the complete intelligence assessment of your network. Every contact, every handler, every operation you've compromised over the past 3 years. Harrison's eyes fixed on the folder with horrified fascination. "You've been watching me for a year? 18 months. We identified you as a security risk after the Brisbane incident, when classified submarine positions were leaked to Chinese intelligence 6 hours after you received the briefing. But instead of arresting you immediately, we decided to use you." The words hit Harrison like physical blows. "Use me how?" "We fed you carefully crafted intelligence designed to identify your handlers and map your communication methods. Every piece of classified information you stole and sold was actually disinformation designed to mislead your clients while revealing their intelligence priorities." Natalie was staring at me with a mixture of awe and horror. Even she hadn't known the full scope of the counterintelligence operation. The submarine positions were false. The communication protocols were outdated. The personnel files contained fabricated information. For the past year, you've been selling worthless intelligence while helping us identify and neutralize Chinese intelligence operations throughout the Pacific. Harrison's weapon began to shake as the implications crashed over him. "Everything I sold was fake?" "Not everything. We had to provide some genuine intelligence to maintain your credibility, but nothing operationally significant, nothing that would compromise actual security. My handlers, they'll think I betrayed them deliberately." "They'll think exactly that, which means you have approximately 12 hours before Chinese intelligence decides to permanently silence a blown asset." The room fell silent except for the hum of air conditioning and the sound of Harrison's increasingly rapid breathing. He was trapped between federal prosecution and foreign assassination, with no good options remaining. "But there is a third alternative," I said quietly. Harrison's eyes snapped to mine. "What alternative?" "Complete cooperation with federal authorities. Full disclosure of your network, your methods, your contacts. In exchange for protective custody and reduced sentence."
Protective custody where? Federal prison is exactly where foreign intelligence services have the easiest access. Not federal prison, military protective custody at a classified location. New identity, new background, complete separation from your previous life. It was a lie, of course. Harrison had committed too many crimes and compromised too many operations to ever be granted such consideration. But I needed him to lower his weapon and surrender peacefully before someone got killed. Harrison stared at the file folder, his mind racing through possibilities. The weapon in his hand gradually lowered as desperation gave way to calculation. What guarantee do I have that you'll honor such an arrangement? The same guarantee you gave the families of the sailors who died because of your intelligence leaks, Natalie said coldly. None. Harrison's head snapped toward her, anger flashing across his features. Those deaths weren't my fault. I never provided intelligence that would directly endanger personnel. The Perth incident. 6 sailors died when their submarine was detected and depth-charged by Chinese destroyers. Destroyers that knew exactly where to look because you sold them the patrol routes. Harrison's face crumpled as he realized that his rationalization of harmless intelligence sales had been built on willful ignorance. People had died because of his greed, and he'd simply chosen not to acknowledge the connection. I never meant for anyone to die, he whispered. But they did die, and now you have to choose whether anyone else dies today. Harrison looked around the room at 3 people who had trusted him, respected him, and followed his leadership. Now they were his prisoners, witnesses to his crimes, obstacles to his escape. The weapon in his hand seemed to grow heavier as he realized that the man he'd become was someone he no longer recognized. Put down the gun, Captain, Natalie said gently. Let's end this before it gets worse.
Harrison's finger tightened on the trigger, and I prepared to dive for cover. But instead of firing, he slowly placed the weapon on the conference table and stepped back with his hands raised. I surrender, he said quietly. I surrender. Harrison's surrender should have been the end of it. In movies, the bad guy drops his weapon, raises his hands, and everyone walks away to file paperwork and give testimony. But real life has a way of refusing to follow Hollywood scripts, especially when federal crimes and foreign intelligence services are involved. The moment Harrison placed his weapon on the conference table, Petty Officer Martinez activated the emergency communication panel. Within seconds, base security alarms began blaring throughout Meridian Naval Intelligence Center. Red lights flashed in the corridors, and automated voice announcements declared a Code 7 security incident, hostile action by authorized personnel. Base lockdown initiated, came the robotic voice through the intercom. All personnel remain in current positions. Security teams respond to conference room Delta. Harrison's eyes widened as he realized the implications. You've trapped us all in here. Standard protocol, I replied, though I was beginning to have my own concerns about the situation. Security needs to verify the threat has been neutralized before allowing movement. The sound of heavy boots echoed in the corridor outside, growing louder as the base security team approached. But something felt wrong. The response was too fast, too coordinated, as if it had been pre-positioned rather than reactive. A sharp knock came up the door. Base security. Open immediately. I moved toward the door, but Harrison grabbed my arm. Wait, something's not right. What do you mean? Base security doesn't knock. They announce themselves and enter. And they don't respond to Code 7 incidents with just a team. They send the entire security battalion. Natalie frowned. How do you know our security protocols so well? Harrison's face went pale. Because I helped write them, and I may have shared them with people who shouldn't have had access. The knocking came again, more insistent. Naval intelligence personnel, open this door now. I looked through the conference room's small security window. 3 men in what appeared to be base security uniforms stood in the corridor. Their equipment looked right, their badges seemed authentic, but something about their positioning troubled me. They were standing too close together, blocking sightlines rather than maintaining tactical spacing. Those aren't our security personnel, I said quietly. How can you tell? Natalie asked.
Their weapons are wrong. Base security carries M18 pistols and M4 carbines. Those men have foreign manufactured weapons. Harrison sank into a chair, his face in his hands. They've found me, my handlers. They've come to clean up the loose ends. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Harrison's surrender had triggered the base lockdown, but it had also sent a signal to his foreign contacts that their operation was blown. Rather than abandoning their compromised asset, they'd decided to eliminate him and anyone else who knew about their network. "How many people know about the meeting today?" I asked quickly. "Admiral Thornfield, FBI Agent Rivera, and the three of us," Natalie replied. "And whoever Harrison told about his location." Harrison looked up miserably. "I was supposed to check in every 2 hours. When I missed my last check-in, they would have activated emergency protocols." Which are what exactly? Asset elimination and evidence destruction. The men outside had stopped knocking and were now working on the door lock with what sounded like electronic equipment. We had, perhaps, 2 minutes before they gained entry. I moved to the emergency communication panel and tried to contact Admiral Thornfield's office. The line was dead. I tried base security. Also dead. Either the communication system was being jammed or someone had cut the hard lines. "We need to assume we're on our own," I said, moving to secure Harrison's weapon from the conference table. "There's another way out," Petty Officer Martinez said quietly. "The emergency exit behind the projection screen. It leads to the maintenance corridors." "Where do the maintenance corridors go?" "Eventually to the loading dock, but they pass through the communication center on the way." I considered our options. We could try to reach the communication center and call for genuine help, but that would mean moving through corridors where we could be ambushed. We could try to reach the loading dock and escape the building entirely, but that would mean abandoning our posts and potentially allowing Harrison's handlers to destroy evidence. Or we could stay and fight 3 armed operatives in a confined space with minimal cover. "There's a fourth option," Harrison said suddenly. "The secure communications array in this room connects directly to FBI headquarters through encrypted satellite link. If the foreign operatives haven't found and disabled the satellite uplink, we could reach Agent Rivera directly." "Where's the satellite communicator?" Harrison pointed to what I assumed was a decorative panel in the wall, behind that cover, but accessing it requires dual authorization, 2 separate security codes entered simultaneously. "What codes?" "Captain-level authorization and Admiral-level authorization." Natalie and I looked at each other. She had captain-equivalent authority as a Coast Guard lieutenant commander, and I had Admiral-level access through my actual rank. The electronic sounds at the door were getting more sophisticated. Whatever they were using to bypass the lock was nearly finished. "Do it," I ordered. Natalie and I moved to the wall panel and removed the decorative cover, revealing a military-grade communication system with dual input terminals. The screen showed encrypted communication protocols and satellite positioning data.
On 3, I said. Input your authorization simultaneously. 1, 2, 3. We entered our codes at the same moment. The system activated with a soft chime, and a connection status indicator showed green. Within seconds, we had a secure line to FBI counterintelligence. "Agent Rivera," came the voice through the encrypted speaker. "This is Rear Admiral Kessler at Meridian Naval Intelligence. We have hostile operatives attempting to breach Conference Room Delta. Captain Harrison is in custody, but foreign agents are attempting asset elimination." "Confirmed, Admiral. Local FBI tactical team is en route. ETA 12 minutes. Can you maintain your position?" I looked at the door, where the electronic lock was beginning to show failure indicators. "Negative. Hostiles will have access in approximately 60 seconds. "Copy that. Base security has been neutralized, 3 guards down, non-fatal. The entire facility is under hostile control except for your location." The lock clicked open. Through the door's security window, I could see the 3 operatives preparing to enter, their weapons raised and ready. "We're out of time," I announced to the room. "Martinez, get that emergency exit open. Natalie, help me create a defensive position." We overturned the heavy conference table, creating a barrier between ourselves and the main entrance. Harrison, despite his compromised status, moved to help without being asked. "Why are you helping us?" Natalie demanded. "Because those people aren't here to rescue me," Harrison replied wimly. "They're here to kill everyone who knows about the operation, including me." The door swung open and the first operative entered in a tactical crouch.
His weapons swept the room professionally, and when he saw our improvised barricade, he signaled for his teammates to follow. "American intelligence personnel," he called out in accented English. "Surrender now and you will not be harmed." Counteroffer? You surrender now and you might survive the next 12 minutes until FBI tactical arrives. The operative's response was a burst of automatic weapons fire that splintered the conference table and sent fragments of wood flying across the room. We were definitely past the negotiation phase. Martinez had gotten the emergency exit open and was waving us toward the maintenance corridor. But moving to the exit would mean exposing ourselves to hostile fire. "Covering fire," I ordered. Then leaned around the edge of our barrier and put 3 rounds center mass into the lead operative. His body armor absorbed the impact, but the force knocked him backward into his teammates. "Move!" I shouted. Natalie and Harrison sprinted for the emergency exit, while I provided suppressing fire. Martinez had already disappeared into the maintenance pod corridor. I was about to follow when I saw the second operative preparing to throw something small and round into the room. Grenade. I dove toward the exit as the explosive detonated behind me, the blast wave slamming me into the corridor wall with enough force to rattle my teeth. Smoke and debris filled the conference room, but through the haze I could see the operatives advancing. The maintenance corridor was narrow, dimly lit, and filled with pipes and electrical conduits that would provide limited cover. It stretched ahead into darkness, with junction points leading off in multiple directions. "Which way to the communication center?" I asked Martinez as we were grouped. "Left at the first junction, then straight for about 50 meters. We moved quickly through the corridor, Harrison keeping pace despite his obvious fear. Behind us, I could hear the pursuit getting closer. We had perhaps 30 seconds before the operatives reached our position. "What's the alternative route?" I asked. "Loading dock is straight ahead, but it's completely exposed. No cover, no defensive positions." I considered our tactical situation. 3 hostile operatives with superior firepower pursuing 4 people through a confined space. One of our number was a compromised asset whose loyalty was questionable. Our primary objective was to maintain communication with federal authorities and survive until reinforcements arrived. We split up, I decided. Martinez and Harrison head for the loading dock, create noise, draw attention. Natalie and I will reach the communication center and maintain contact with FBI tactical. "That's suicide," Harrison protested. "Those operatives will hunt down whoever they can find first." "Which is why you need to make sure they find you and Martinez instead of us," I replied coldly. "Consider it your chance to prove which side you're really on." Harrison nodded grimly and followed Martinez toward the loading dock. Natalie and I moved toward the communications center, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether any of us survived to see the FBI tactical team arrive. The communications center was a fortress of electronic equipment, server racks, and monitoring stations that hummed with constant activity. Banks of screens displayed real-time intelligence feeds from around the world, while encrypted communication arrays maintained contact with naval operations across 3 time zones. Under normal circumstances, it was one of the most secure locations in the entire facility.
Today, it felt like a trap. Natalie and I entered through the maintenance access panel, immediately taking cover behind a bank of servers while I assessed our tactical situation. The room had 2 main entrances, the corridor we just left and the primary access door from the main facility. Both were potential entry points for hostile operatives, but they were also our only escape routes. "How long until FBI tactical arrives?" Natalie whispered. I checked my watch. 8 minutes, assuming they're not delayed by hostile action outside the facility. 8 minutes felt like an eternity when armed operatives were hunting you through a compromised building. I moved to the primary communication console and began establishing contact with Admiral Thornfield's emergency command center. The encryption protocols took precious seconds to authenticate, but finally I had a secure line to Naval Intelligence Command. "Admiral Thornfield here. Sir, this is Admiral Kessler. Meridian facility is compromised. Hostile foreign operatives have breached security. Captain Harrison is in custody, but they're attempting to eliminate all witnesses." "Confirmed, Admiral. We've been monitoring the situation through satellite surveillance. FBI tactical is en route. But be advised, there are at least 6 hostiles in the building, not 3. My blood ran cold. 6 operatives meant this wasn't just an asset elimination mission. This was a full-scale intelligence operation designed to seize or destroy whatever classified materials they could access. "Sir, what's the status of base security?" "Neutralized.
The hostiles used some kind of incapacitating gas in the security center. Personnel are alive but unconscious. You're the only armed resistance in the facility." Through the communications center's security monitors, I could see Martinez and Harrison moving through the loading dock area. They'd successfully drawn the attention of at least 2 operatives, but that still left 4 unaccounted for. "Natalie," I said quietly, "check the secondary monitors. I need to know where the other hostiles are positioned." She moved to a bank of surveillance screens showing different areas of the facility. Her face went pale as she studied the displays. 2 operatives are pursuing Martinez and Harrison. One is securing the main entrance, probably to prevent reinforcements from entering easily, and 3 are heading this way. 3 operatives converging on our position meant we were about to be seriously outnumbered in a confined space with limited cover. I opened a secure channel to FBI Tactical. "Agent Rivera, this is Admiral Kessler. What's your ETA?" "6 minutes out, Admiral. Can you maintain your position?" "Negative. We're about to be overrun. I need you to patch me through to the base commander at Norfolk Naval Station." "Copy that. Transferring now." The line crackled as the connection switched to Norfolk's command center. "This is Captain Morrison, Norfolk Base Commander." "Captain, this is Rear Admiral Kessler. I'm authorizing Emergency Protocol 7 at Meridian Naval Intelligence Center." There was a pause. Protocol 7 was the nuclear option, literally. It authorized the complete destruction of a compromised intelligence facility to prevent classified materials from falling into foreign hands. "Admiral, are you certain? Protocol 7 is irreversible." "I'm certain, Captain. Activate the protocol with a 15-minute delay. If FBI Tactical can't secure the facility by then, we destroy it." "Understood, Admiral. Protocol 7 activated. 15 minutes to detonation." I closed the channel and turned to Natalie, who was staring at me with a mixture of shock and admiration. "You just ordered the destruction of an entire intelligence facility?" she said. "I ordered the protection of classified materials that could compromise national security if captured. Sometimes that requires difficult decisions." The sound of forced entry echoed through the communications center as the hostiles breached the primary access door. I grabbed Natalie and pulled her behind the largest server bank just as automatic weapons fire began shredding the electronic equipment around us. Sparks flew from damaged monitors, and the acrid smell of burning circuits filled the air. Several communication arrays went dark, cutting our contact with the outside world. But the primary satellite uplink remained functional, maintaining our connection to FBI Tactical. "American personnel," called a voice with a distinct Eastern European accent. "You are surrounded. Surrender now, and you will be treated according to international law." "Counteroffer," I replied, chambering around. "You surrender now, and you might live long enough to be deported instead of buried." The response was another burst of automatic fire that destroyed 2 more server racks. These operatives weren't interested in negotiation. They were here to eliminate witnesses and seize whatever intelligence they could access. I leaned around the edge of our cover and put 2 rounds into the nearest hostile. His shots found their mark, but his body armor absorbed most of the impact. He staggered but remained functional, returning fire that forced me back into cover. "We need to move," I told Natalie. "They're going to flank us if we stay here." "Where can we go?" "The secure vault. It's designed to withstand direct assault, and it has independent communication systems." The secure vault was located at the far end of the communication center, protected by blast doors and electronic locks that require Admiral-level authorization. If we could reach it, we could establish a defensive position that would be nearly impossible to breach. But getting there meant crossing 30 meters of open space while under fire from multiple directions. "Covering fire," I ordered, then began laying down suppressing fire while Natalie sprinted toward the vault access panel.
She reached the panel and began entering authorization codes while I kept the hostiles pinned behind their own cover. The vault's massive blast doors began sliding open with a mechanical rumble that echoed through the room. "It's open!" Natalie called. I was about to follow her when I heard a sound that made my blood freeze, the distinctive beeping of an electronic timer. One of the hostiles had planted an explosive device somewhere in the communications center. "Bomb!" I shouted, diving toward the vault as a massive explosion ripped through the communications center.
The blast wave slammed me into the vault's armored wall, and debris rained down from the ceiling. Emergency lighting activated as the main power systems failed, casting everything in hellish red illumination. Through the ringing in my ears, I could hear FBI Agent Rivera's voice crackling through the vault's emergency communication system. "Admiral Kessler, respond. We're breaching the facility now." I grabbed the communication handset. "Agent Rivera, we're secure in the vault, but the communication center is destroyed. Be advised, Protocol 7 is still active. You have 11 minutes to secure the facility before automatic detonation." "Copy that, Admiral. We have the building surrounded and we're engaging hostiles now." Through the vault's armored observation window, I could see muzzle flashes and tactical lights as FBI tactical teams swept through the facility. The sound of sustained gunfire echoed through the corridors, punctuated by the occasional explosion of a flashbang grenade. "Status on Martinez and Harrison?" I asked. "Both secured. Martinez has a minor wound, but he's stable. Harrison is cooperating fully, providing real-time intelligence on hostile positioning and tactics." The irony wasn't lost on me. The traitor who'd started this entire crisis was now helping to resolve it, providing information that would save the lives of federal agents. The gunfire gradually diminished as FBI Tactical gained control of the facility. Through the communication system, I could hear status reports from various teams as they secured different areas of the building. Communications Center secured. 3 hostiles down, 1 wounded and in custody. Loading dock secured. 2 hostiles neutralized. Main entrance secured. 1 hostile in custody. I checked my watch. 6 minutes remained on the Protocol 7 countdown. "Agent Rivera, I need confirmation that all classified materials are secure before I can abort the destruction protocol." "Stand by, Admiral." The next 3 minutes felt eternal as FBI tactical teams swept through the facility, checking every room and securing every piece of classified equipment. Finally, Agent Rivera's voice came back through the communication system. "Admiral, facility is secured. All classified materials are intact. Request permission to abort Protocol 7. I took a deep breath. "Captain Morrison, this is Admiral Kessler. Abort Protocol 7. Repeat, abort Protocol 7. "Confirmed, Admiral. Protocol 7 aborted with 2 minutes 30 seconds remaining." As the immediate crisis passed, I realized that Natalie and I were sitting in an armored vault surrounded by the wreckage of a major intelligence facility, having just prevented a foreign intelligence operation from stealing classified materials that could have compromised national security. "Is it over?" Natalie asked. "This part is over, but the investigation is just beginning. Harrison's network was larger than we thought, and there are probably other compromised assets we haven't identified yet." She nodded thoughtfully. "What happens to him?" "That depends on how much he cooperates with federal authorities. If he provides full disclosure about his network and methods, he might avoid execution. If he doesn't," I shrugged. The vault's blast doors began opening as FBI tactical teams confirmed the area was secure. Agent Rivera appeared in the doorway, her tactical vest marked with dust and debris from the firefight. "Admiral, Lieutenant Commander," she said formally, "the facility is secure. We'll need complete debriefings from both of you. But first, are either of you injured?" I took inventory of my condition. Bruises, cuts from flying debris, temporary hearing loss from the explosion, but nothing serious. "We're functional," I replied. Agent Rivera smiled grimly. "Good, because this investigation is far from over, and we're going to need your expertise to roll up Harrison's entire network." As we emerged from the vault into the devastated communications center, I realized that the day's events had fundamentally changed everything. My cover was blown, Harrison's treason was exposed, and the relationship between Natalie and I would never be the same. But we were alive, the classified materials were secure, and justice would finally be served. Sometimes that's all you can ask for. 6 months later, I stood in the same conference room where everything had changed, though it bore little resemblance to the space where Harrison had held us at gunpoint. The walls had been rebuilt, the furniture replaced, and new security systems installed that would make a repeat of that day's events virtually impossible. But the memories remained as vivid as if they'd happened yesterday. The debriefing process had taken 3 months. Countless hours with FBI investigators, congressional oversight committees, and internal affairs review boards. Every decision analyzed, every action questioned, every protocol examined under the microscope of hindsight. Harrison's cooperation had been extensive, too extensive, some critics argued. His detailed confessions had exposed a network of compromised personnel that reached into the highest levels of multiple government agencies. 27 arrests across 4 military branches and 6 federal agencies. 43 operations compromised, an estimated $12 million in classified information sold to foreign governments over a 3-year period. The scope of the damage was staggering, and the investigation was still ongoing.
But today wasn't about the investigation. Today was about transformation. Admiral Kessler? Came Admiral Thornfield's voice as he entered the conference room, followed by a small group of officials I didn't immediately recognize. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I stood at attention, though the formality felt strange after months of congressional hearings and media interviews. Of course, sir. Admiral Thornfield gestured to the civilians accompanying him. I'd like you to meet Deputy Director Sarah Chen from the Defense Intelligence Agency and Dr. Marcus Webb from the National Security Council. They have a proposition for you. Deputy Director Chen stepped forward, extending her hand. Admiral, your actions during the Harrison incident have attracted considerable attention at the highest levels of government. Your ability to operate under deep cover while maintaining operational effectiveness is exactly the kind of skill set we need for a new initiative. What kind of initiative? I asked. Dr. Webb opened a classified briefing folder. A joint task force combining military intelligence, federal law enforcement, and international cooperation to identify and neutralize insider threats before they can cause the kind of damage Harrison inflicted. You want me to hunt traitors professionally, I said. We want you to lead a team that prevents the next Harrison from ever getting started, Deputy Director Chen corrected. Early identification, intervention strategies, and, when necessary, counterintelligence operations to turn compromised assets into double agents. The irony wasn't lost on me. The investigation that had nearly cost my life was now being offered as my life's work. The position comes with a promotion to Vice Admiral and command authority over joint operations across all military branches. Admiral Thornfield added, you'd be reporting directly to the Secretary of Defense. I considered the offer carefully. It represented everything I'd worked toward in my military career. High-level command, significant responsibility, the opportunity to make a real difference in national security. But it also meant accepting that my life would never be normal, that secrecy and suspicion would always be part of my daily existence. What about my family? My relationship with my sister has been complicated since the incident. Dr. Webb nodded sympathetically. We're aware of the personal costs involved. Lieutenant Commander Natalie Kessler has also been offered a position with the task force, should you both choose to accept. That caught me by surprise. Natalie? Her performance during the crisis was exemplary, Deputy Director Chen explained. Her ability to adapt to rapidly changing circumstances while maintaining operational focus is exactly what we need in field operatives. Plus, she has personal experience with how insider threats operate. I thought about the conversation I had with Natalie just 2 weeks earlier, the first real discussion we'd managed since the congressional hearings ended. She'd been struggling with guilt over trusting Harrison, despite the fact that his deception had fooled intelligence professionals with decades of experience. I keep thinking about all the signs I missed, all the times he asked questions that seemed innocent but were actually intelligence gathering. You couldn't have known, I replied. Harrison spent years building relationships and establishing trust. That's what made him so dangerous. But you figured it out. You were investigating him while I was giving him information about Navy operations. I figured it out because I had access to intelligence sources you didn't, because I was specifically looking for security breaches. You were doing your job and trusting your commanding officer, exactly what you're supposed to do. The conversation had been a start, but I could see that Natalie was still processing the betrayal, still questioning her own judgment. Working together might help her regain confidence, or it might make the situation worse. I'd like to take whatever time you need, but I should mention that there's a time-sensitive component to this offer. What kind of time-sensitive component? Deputy Director Chen exchanged glances with Dr. Webb before responding. We've identified another potential security breach. This one in the Air Force's Space Operations Command.
The preliminary indicators are similar to what we saw with Harrison: unauthorized financial transactions, suspicious communications, compromised operational security. And you want us to investigate it? We want you to prevent it from becoming another Harrison situation. Early intervention, careful investigation, and, if necessary, counterintelligence operations to turn compromised assets into double agents. I realized they weren't just offering me a job, they were offering me the chance to prevent other families from going through what the Kessler family had experienced, the chance to stop betrayals before they destroyed lives and compromised national security. How long do I have to decide? The space operations investigation needs to begin within 2 weeks. But frankly, Admiral, you're our first choice for this position. We're prepared to wait for your answer. After they left, I sat alone in the rebuilt conference room, thinking about the path that had brought me to this moment. 18 months ago, I'd been a relatively unknown intelligence officer operating under deep cover. Today, I was being offered command of a joint counterintelligence task force with unprecedented authority. The cost had been enormous. My cover identity destroyed, my family relationships damaged, my faith in institutional loyalty shaken. But the alternative had been worse. If Harrison's network had continued operating, how many more operations would have been compromised? How many more lives lost? I pulled out my phone and called Natalie. "Hey," she answered, her voice cautious but warm. "How did the meeting go?" "They offered me a promotion to Vice Admiral and command of a joint counterintelligence task force." "That's incredible, Adriana. You deserve it."
They offered you a position, too, as a field operative with the same task force. There was a long pause. Working together? Working together, hunting insider threats before they can cause the kind of damage Harrison did. Another pause. What do you think we should do? I looked around the conference room where our lives had been forever changed, where family loyalty and professional duty had collided with devastating consequences. The scars would always be there, but they didn't have to define us. "I think we should do what we've always done," I said. "Serve our country and protect each other. Even if it means more secrets, more dangers. Especially then. We know what the cost of failure looks like. We've lived through it." Natalie was quiet for a moment. "Okay, let's do it. But this time, we go in with our eyes open. This time, we go in together." 3 weeks later, Vice Admiral Adriana Kessler and Lieutenant Commander Natalie Kessler reported for duty at the Joint Counterintelligence Task Force headquarters in a classified location outside Washington, D.C. The building looked unremarkable from the outside, just another government office complex in a city full of them. But inside, we were building something unprecedented. A unified approach to identifying and neutralizing insider threats before they could compromise national security. Our first case was already waiting, an Air Force major with gambling debts and suspicious overseas contacts. As we reviewed the initial intelligence reports, I realized that the Harrison incident had taught us more than just the cost of betrayal. It had taught us the value of trust, the importance of family, and the strength that comes from facing impossible situations together. "Ready for this?" Natalie asked as we prepared for our first operational briefing. "With you as my partner, I'm ready for anything." Some betrayals destroy families. Others forge them into something stronger than they ever imagined possible. We were about to find out which kind we were. Have you ever had to choose between what felt safe and what felt right, between protecting yourself and protecting others? Drop your thoughts in the comments. In a world full of people who'll tell you to put yourself first, sometimes the most radical thing you can do is choose service over safety. And sometimes that choice changes everything. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.